Hello, nerds! Thank you for joining me here on Nerd News Clips. This is the second channel. This is the place for all of the short-form content as well as the individual sections and just generally speaking smaller things. If you are into the longer form content, youtube.com/generallynerdy is the place to go see that. With that out of the way, let's get into this. TV streaming, we have some stuff. So we do have a couple follow-ups. First and foremost, in the follow-up section, we're talking Moon Knight. Happy Moon Knight Day. I have yet to watch episode 1, so we will probably be talking about 1 and 2 next week. But we do have a little bit of a follow-up. I don't know if this is really on many people's radar. That's why I'm putting it in today's broadcast. But this is not in the proper MCU. Moon Knight is in its own separate side universe, pocket universe, whatever you want to call it. Partially because of the violence and the more mature rating, but also partially so that they can experiment, it would seem. There have been reports saying that they're going to try things in the Moon Knight series that they wouldn't otherwise do in the MCU. So hopefully that bodes well for the future of the MCU, because they need a little bit of help these days, not gonna lie. So now we're going to talk about, we're still in follow-ups, we're going to be talking about Halo, the series. Episode 1 came out last week, and I heard very mixed things about it. I was unable to watch it until the end of the weekend, so everyone already put out their hot take on the Halo series, and so we're just going to do a real quick little honest nerd situation. So, first and foremost, when you're watching a piece of fiction, when you're indulging in some fiction, the first and most important thing about that piece of fiction is the internal logic. Does everything that they give you inside of this one IP, inside of this episode, inside of this series, what have you, does it make sense on its own logic? If it is also part of a larger fandom, if it is part, if there's more to it than just this one piece of fiction, then the secondary trait, first is internal logic, second is mythology. Does it make sense inside the mythology that is already pre-existing? The source material, does it honor the source material, that kind of stuff. Looking at it from that perspective, this still doesn't really work super well. There's a lot of internal logic issues that kind of pull you out, even disregarding, much like the writers did, disregarding the existing mythology for Halo. If you just go on based on the merits of this series, then they're painting Master Chief to be something that he really is not, even inside of this, inside of just what they have for episode 1. The primary thing that I'm thinking of is they've created this perfect soldier who then turns on everything he knows. Based off of potentially just touching a thing and then maybe having a memory, or what they write off as visions in the dialogue very explicitly, until all of a sudden it's not just visions and he knows it's at once gives you too much information and also not enough, because we don't need to see Master Chief's face, especially not in the first episode. Mandalorian, we went 3 or 4, maybe even 5 episodes before we saw Mandalorian's face. So I understand the desire to show Master Chief's face. I understand the reasoning behind showing Master Chief's face. I just think that the execution of doing it, being as it is such a big deal, was very poorly done. But so, internal logic. If you have this perfect soldier, then communication with base, communication with commanding officers, with whoever is the person in charge of this soldier program, at the very least, should always, it makes a lot more logical sense that communication would exist in a much more conducive way. And they're just it's just all over the place. I can't even pin down all of these exact specifics, because the broad strokes are so off that the specifics don't even matter after a certain point, because none of this would have happened in the original mythology, and none of this would have happened the way they set up the first half of this episode. So there's a lot of stuff that's really butting heads against itself. There is potential that this could get better. From what I've heard about episode 2, that's not exactly the case. Also, the Covenant taking in a human as their own seems very much out of place, because I'm pretty sure, at least in the again, this is separate mythology because it's the original mythology. In the original mythology, they didn't have any experience with humans, from what I remember, until they ran into Master Chief. But yeah, okay, maybe that happened somehow. I don't know. There's just, again, the broad strokes are the wrong color and in the wrong place at this point. So I cannot recommend going into Halo. Even based on its own merits, it's still a weak science fiction series. I will probably watch another 2 to 3 episodes, just in case it does turn around and get better, but as it stands right now, not a strong series. So that brings us to Nerd Rant done. We're over it. Halo is what it is. So we do have one other follow-up for TV streaming, and that is Archive 81 over on Netflix. Has not been renewed for a second season, which is hot garbage. Netflix does have a pretty good track record, thanks in large part to Mike Flanagan, with horror series. So why they would not renew a series that was #1 streaming across all platforms, like it had the largest numbers across all platforms for about 2 to 3 weeks straight, and then they don't renew it for a second season, even after leaving it on a cliffhanger, like that's just bad form, Netflix, bad form. Like, I understand you're getting a lot of competition, a lot of solid competition, but that doesn't mean you can't also still be taking minor risks. I mean, you're taking large risks with other properties that we don't talk about here on this show because they're not worth giving breath to, but you're not going to take a chance on something that legitimately was doing well. That just doesn't make any sense to me. So yeah, Archive 81 done. And that's what we've got for follow-ups. We do have some new news. Actually, no, I take that back. We have one more follow-up that was that was announced this morning. So it's in a different place on the notes, and I apologize. But Umbrella Academy is our next follow-up. We just got the announcement that Vanya Hargreaves is in fact going to be coming out as trans and becoming Victor Hargreaves in season 3. Vanya, the white violin, if you remember, is played by Elliot Page. Elliot Page relatively recently, I guess, has come out as trans, and so it was announced shortly after Elliot made the announcement that the character that Elliot plays is going to remain a cisgendered female. Well, apparently that's not the case anymore. So very interesting, potentially going to be a get woke, go broke kind of situation for Netflix on this one as well. But that is what we have for follow-ups. And so now let's get into news. Our first piece of news for TV streaming is a new series called Dark Matter. Joel Edgerton is set to star. It is going to be written and showrun by Blake Crouch, who is the author of the book that the series is going to be based on. So that's pretty good. I've only read the synopsis of this book. I haven't actually read the book. It's being billed as like one of the best science fiction books to have come out recently. It's pretty light on the science fiction elements and it's from the synopsis anyway, fairly light on the science fiction elements and a little more thriller aspect. So makes sense that something like this would make its way into popular culture. There is not a release date just yet. So, I mean, as we get closer, I'm sure we'll do at least one more follow-up on this once the release date gets announced. And then we're moving over. Oh, this is kind of a double announcement. So James Bond, or specifically MGM, who owns the James Bond franchise, was bought out by Amazon last week for $8.5 billion. Amazon's first thing they're going to do now that they owned the intellectual property of James Bond, at least in the live action film kind of arena, is they're going to do a reality game show with it. This is so weird. So this is it's the name of the show. I guess we should start there. The name of the show is going to be 007's Road to a Million. So it's basically groups. So it's like The Amazing Race or any of those other shows like that. You get groups of people and they're going to go to locations throughout the world in hopes of winning a lump of money. So it seems like this show was already in the works because all of the pre-production and stuff has been done long before Amazon purchased MGM. So now that they have the rights to the 007 name and franchise, they're just tacked that onto this thing. It's probably wasn't going to do well at all previously. Now it'll probably do kind of well for the first season, maybe. Because it is set up to go to all of these iconic locations throughout the world that are that James Bond locations from the movies and such. So, I mean, that will be at least have some sort of novelty for the first season. If it's going to go past that at all, oof, very much remains to be seen. But this is the first thing that Amazon's doing, and I think this is further proof that they are going to be squandering all of the IPs that they purchase. Moving right along, we have another announcement. This one is for HBO Max, a new series in the It universe. This new series is going to be called Welcome to Derry. It is going to be a prequel to the Andy Muchietti It movies. Andy Muchietti and his wife Barbara and their writing partner, what is his name? Oh, I lost it. Jason Fuchs are going to be producing and writing, and I believe even Fuchs is going to be directing some of these episodes. So it will have very strong ties to those Muchietti movies, the It and It Chapter 2. So far, not a whole lot is known about Welcome to Derry, but the little bit that we do know seems to imply that it is going to revolve around a character named Bob Gray, who is from the original Stephen King novel and was alluded to in the Chapter 2 Andy Muschietti movie. So pretty deep on the lore, hopefully. All I want to know is, are we going to see the giant turtle that vomited forth the universe? Because I think that's some of the craziest elements of those books, but or of that book specifically, I guess. Well, that's all we got on this one. And then we have nothing else for news, so let's get into suggestions. Our suggestion today is actually recommendation from a viewer. Manly25 over on the TikTok has requested a spotlight, if you will, for Young Justice Season 4. So if you are an HBO Max subscriber, or if you have other means of getting this and you are appreciative of the DC animated universe, then Young Justice is obviously a series you probably have already watched. But if you have yet to dive into such things, then Young Justice is a great place to start. Season 4 is actually very, very solid. It ended December of last year. It has yet to be picked up for a 5th season. If you remember though, Season 4 was a little bit of a gift to fans and was announced a little while back, and then when it happened, it was kind of a big deal, and now it's back in limbo. So theoretically, they could leave it where it is, though there is possible way to get a season 5. So if it gets enough attention, perhaps it will get a season 5. So go give Season 4 of Young Justice some attention, because it is absolutely worth your time. Once again, this has been just a brief segment from the larger episode that has been posted over on the main channel, youtube.com/generallynerdy. Go over there for the long form content, or just subscribe here if you want it in bite-sized chunks. Thank you very much for joining me, nerds. We'll see you in the next one. Before we go though, always remember that if it's generally nerdy, it's probably here.